All right, so today I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I have a few projects in the works, but they're not ready to launch quite yet. So today I thought I'd just sit down and answer some of the most popular questions that I get on the Monopoly videos, or just ones that are really good. The criteria that I used for picking out the questions was just simply ones that either get asked a lot or ones that I just thought were exceptionally good. So I picked the first 10 that I came across. So if you have a question that wasn't in there, feel free to write it in the comments. And if you guys like this sort of thing, then I'll look at making some more of these. Okay, so the first question I have here is why don't you like the yellows? They're still on the jail side of the board. Okay, that's a good question. So, first of all, the go side and the jail side of the board is just kind of a concept that I made up where you split the Monopoly board in half. Here's my best John Madden here. And just basically say that the properties that are over here are definitely going to get landed on a lot more than the properties that are over on this side. And this is just kind of a common thing in terms of Monopoly where ultimately, if you do a heat map on the board, you're going to find that especially the reds and the yellows are going to get, or sorry, the reds and the oranges are going to be landed on by far the most. And so that causes you to be able to get a lot more rents and a lot higher likelihood to be landed on, especially since jail is such a common spot to land on the board. So the thing with the yellows though is that once you start getting this far around, the yellows are a bit expensive to develop. And in terms of being able to develop them, if you're stuck in between the yellows and the reds in terms of spending your money, the reds are going to get landed on a lot more, especially because Illinois Avenue has a card that can send someone straight to it. So you're going to end up having a lot more rolls where somebody's maybe coming out of jail, they get one or two rolls and they're in the reds, and then they end up hopping over the yellows themselves. So in terms of the yellows, I don't mind them, but the issue that's going to come up is that a lot of times they're very expensive to develop, and if you can develop something like red for about the same price, you're going to get a lot more rents out of it. So that's the deal with that. Next question I have here is what if everybody uses this strategy, then who wins? And that is kind of a funny one. So that's something where I actually took the time a few months ago to make a video called How to Win Monopoly Every Time. And the whole purpose of that, it's all based around the oranges and being able to defeat the oranges, because ultimately the oranges are going to be the most powerful property on the board. But if somebody else is using that knowledge to their advantage, then how do you end up taking down the oranges? There's a lot of strength in being able to hold a property in which no one else can build a monopoly on that property. So being able to pick out some of the strongest monopolies to get, such as red, orange, light blue, even like a railroad can really change the course of a game. Like having one or two railroads is not very dangerous, but when you have all four railroads, they can really pack a punch, and everybody's forced to potentially land on a railroad every single turn if you have all four railroads. So being able to counter some of those is pretty big, but yeah, that's basically the biggest thing is, how can everybody win every time? Well, a lot of that is going to be answered in some of these other questions that are upcoming. All right, so we've got what about auctioning? What should you do? Overprice a little, jump in on your own auction. What should you do? That's a really, really good question. And so the point of auctions is obviously to kind of make the game go a lot faster. The thing with them is that if you don't play with auctions, it takes forever to actually land on every spot, especially, people who want it or don't want it or choose not to buy or whatever. It makes sure that when people land on something, they're both more likely to buy it and somebody on the board is going to get it. So the real break even point on this is the amount of mortgage. And so, just for example, let's take Ventnor Avenue for a second. And if you look at Ventnor Avenue, it's not really a bad property, but it's not really a good property either. It's just sort of out there. And as I was saying earlier, I really don't think the yellows are the best route to go, just because they're a lot more expensive than red. Or sorry, they're the same amount as red, but they do not actually get landed on enough to really offset that. So if we look at Ventnor Avenue here, the cost is 260. So let's say you or anybody puts it up for auction and you start creeping up and you're at 10, 20, 30, whatever. If you buy Ventnor Avenue for 130, right? That means that if you buy it for 130 and then mortgage it, it's a wash. It's $0. So the thing is, if you land on Ventnor and the rent here is $22, well, that means that if you can assume that, we'll write a 22 here. If you assume that Ventnor Avenue is going to be landed on one time during the course of the entire game, well, now if you pay 152 for it, now you're looking at breaking even with that. And when it comes to the properties, having properties in any regard is better than not having the property. So we're kind of looking at these break even points. And let's say it's early in the game. You really don't want Ventnor Avenue. It's not part of your plan. But if you mortgage it, it's 130. If you assume, hey, if I keep this thing unmortgaged for at least, the next, 5-6 go arounds, let's say we assume it's going to be landed on twice, then you add another 22 to that, and now you're looking at 174. So even if we're looking at, okay, how many times are people going to land on it, what is my break even point, and everything else, you can start looking at where maybe if it's early in the game and nobody's going for it at like 180, 190, just having a property for a net $20 or $30 is great. I mean, that's less than, Mediterranean Avenue. Like, nothing is that cheap on the board. And that's kind of the way you need to look at the properties, is how do you go about doing that and having this break even point? A little bit of it too is, okay, you need money to actually build properties on the good, or build houses on the good properties. So you don't want to spend too much money on all this stuff. But if you end up getting, say, all three yellows for, I don't know, like $600 or something, which would be super cheap, then all of a sudden some of those ratios aren't quite so bad. And if you can get a couple houses on each, then all you really need is somebody to land on it once or twice, and then you're making money. So, if you're making money, that's really all that you need to be doing. So, you don't really need to necessarily worry about all of the little nitpicky things in the beginning. You just want to make sure that you're able to cover your costs of developing a property. Also, a little trick is, let's say you're on Ventnor. You don't want to spend $260 for Ventnor. You can put it up for auction and see if somehow you can get it for less. Or let's say that you do want Ventnor, but you don't really think anybody else is going to go for it. You can put it up for auction and kind of hope that, hey, maybe I get it for, say, 220 or 230 or something along those lines. Another way you can also set up auctions is, for example, let's say Boardwalk. Boardwalk's a very popular spot on the board, and $400 is, it's the most expensive property on the board. Well, let's say that that people might be fighting over it. What you can do is put it up for auction and then hope that people are going to spend, say, $450 or $500 or whatever. Because once you get people kind of pigeonholed with money where they can't quite afford to really do much, or they can't outpunch you in terms of rent prices, like even if they have orange, but they can't really get more than like one or two houses on the properties, then they're really in a deficit where, they're going to be incurring more debts than actually making. So if you can get people to end up spending a lot on some of the auctions, it can be a really good setup for you to try and get people to waste their money on auctions, but then also save yourself money if you can get stuff for lower than sticker price. Has anyone ever finished a game of Monopoly? No, no. Every game that has ever been played is still going on. But that being said, I am a big proponent of following the rules of the game and not having too many house rules like free parking or things of that nature. Because if you add a lot of house rules, that's a lot of why games take a long time. Monopoly is a little bit unique where it's an elimination game. So there's a lot of other games where every player goes until the end. And so if you're like, doing a game night or whatever and somebody gets eliminated, they're just kind of sitting there, right? So there's a lot of stretching the rules in Monopoly compared to other board games where people will decide, oh, well, okay, you would be bankrupt, but I'll give you a free pass around the board. Or, oh, I don't want you to be out of money, so we'll strike a deal, whatever. And my thoughts are just don't even worry about that. I mean, if you guys are actually paying attention and playing the game and everything like that, I mean, the game really shouldn't go more than like an hour. So ultimately, maybe slightly more than an hour and 15 minutes or something. But ultimately, yeah, it shouldn't take that long. So my biggest thing is, hey, if your Monopoly games take forever, then I would recommend strongly that you consider making sure that there's no house rules. Wouldn't it be better to buy the property sets that are further down the row? You get properties that charge more rent while still maintaining the same house cost. That's a great question. That is a fantastic question. And it kind of piggybacks off of what I was saying with yellow before. So if we look at most of the properties here, the cost per house, I mean, we go 50 on the first row, 100 on the next, 150 on top, and then 200. What's going on here? 200 on the last row. So ultimately, if you look at the price of the rents and house rent, they go up the further along you go. The bigger issue, I think, and it's more to do with what is the likelihood of something being landed on. So for example, let's go to blue. Well, blue has the boardwalk card that can definitely be landed on. Also, it's easy to place higher house counts on here because you only have to pay for 2 properties to get developed. So it's easier to, get 3-4 houses, a hotel on these than it is on the greens, just because there's an extra property there. And the same thing kind of goes over here where Baltic and Mediterranean are very cheap to fully develop, but ultimately you got a little more net here to actually catch people. Orange is just the best because of its proximity to jail, since it's able to be rolled on pretty easily. Pink's right next to jail, but rolling a 4 or less is pretty unlikely. And so unless if you're coming from go, it's not exactly that likely to get landed on. So ultimately, that does end up playing a part, but the one where it kind of breaks that rule is yellow and red. And red is just so much more likely to be landed on that, yes, the cost to build up your houses on red is going to be the same as building up on yellow, save for a few bucks in the difference in their purchase price. But ultimately, the bigger thing that we're worried about here is the likelihood of being landed on. So, that is an important factor. But ultimately, the bigger thing at stake is what are the properties that are going to be landed on after you build houses. Okay, next question. When in jail, is it better to pay or try to roll doubles? That's a really, really good question. And this has to do with more of a larger game point where early game, you don't want to be in jail. Late game, you do want to be in jail. And there's a few reasons for this, but ultimately, if you want to be out of jail, you're paying. Like $50 is not a lot of money in Monopoly. So what you want to do is, if you want to be out of jail, you just want to get the hell out of jail. You do not want to be staying in jail. And the reason that you would want to be out of jail is if you're early in the game and you're still hunting for properties. So the thing with hunting properties is, like, especially if you're trying to get like an orange early on, you could roll and land right on orange. Also, yeah, two of the oranges are evens, but then also you could roll an odd with a 9 and land on New York Avenue. So if you're still trying to get the oranges, you want to get out as quick as possible. I mean, when you're in the early game, you want to be getting as many properties as possible. You have no idea where you're going to land. So the properties that you end up with is purely luck. Like, there is nothing that is not luck based when it comes to actually getting the properties. But once you have properties, then it turns into strategy in terms of what you're going to do with the properties that you've gotten. So early in the game, you want to maximize getting on as many properties as possible. You want to go around the board as much as you can. Pass and go can be big because it allows you more money that you can buy more properties with. So you want to definitely make sure that that's a big part of your game. Now, once you reach that turning point and you start building houses and you start getting a little more foundation under you, and especially if other people are starting to get to that point too, well, you want to stay in jail as long as you can. So ultimately, if there's a lot of places that you can land on where you're paying rent, well, you want to avoid going around the board as much as possible. Like, let's say if you have the red Monopoly set and somebody else has the orange. Well, you want to stay in jail as long as you can because you want to give yourself as many times to have people land on your stuff while you don't have to take as many chances to land on their stuff. So ultimately, that's what's going to happen there. Do you ever want to try and roll doubles to save money? The answer is no. No, there's just no reason that would ever be the case. There's just no reason why. Like, $50 is not a lot of money in Monopoly. So what you definitely want to do is it's gonna be black or white. Like, you're either going to want to get out of jail right now, or you're gonna want to stay in there as long as you can. This question here: you missed the most important thing. Is that for all players to agree first on the rules of the game before you start playing? Yeah, that's a fantastic question right here. Also, that's almost more of a statement than a question, but that's super important, and that is that everybody's on the same page in terms of the rules that you're playing with. Because if you're not playing on the same level of rules, it's just going to become bungled as the game goes on. You're going to have people that don't agree on, oh, I thought we were putting money in free parking, or oh, I thought we weren't. Oh, auctions, what's that? And if you're not on the same page with the basics of rules, I mean, you're going to have people who are like, oh, selling a house, you get your full money back. Like, no, you don't. That's the whole point is, you lose half your money when you sell a house. So that's a huge change in the strategy that's being played with is, people need to be playing by the correct set of rules. And so, yeah, that is something to make sure of. If you're not sure, is, hey, are we playing by the correct set of rules? Because that's going to change the way that you're playing the game. All right, this question here. But what if we use the old fun rules? No auctions, money in the middle goes to free parking. That's kind of the same as the last one. So ultimately, they're house rules. You could call them old fun rules, but basically that's just another way of saying house rules. So you can play that way, and it's important that everybody knows how you're playing. But ultimately, it slows down the game. It makes it a lot slower. It might make a lot of sense if you're playing with like a kid who's like 7 or 8 and just kind of trying to figure out their way with things. But ultimately, if you want to play the game and not take forever and really use some real strategy, then yeah, you want to make sure that you're using auctions and not doing free parking. All right, this one here. What happens when you go last, roll a 4 on your first turn, and then basically never hit a property? I've been having a lot of games where I only have 2 to 3 properties and everyone else has 5 to 8. 1,000 in cash doesn't mean much when I'm the objectively weakest player. That's a really good question here, and that is super unlucky, but it does happen. And there are definitely people who say, well, with my luck, I'm going to hit income tax right out of the gate. And, hey, you visualized it, so of course you did. But ultimately, the big thing with this is you want to let the game play out. But if your game plays out that way, and again, you want to be playing with auctions. So with auctions, that also gives you a huge chance to always be in the game. So it is important that you're playing with auctions because that is a big piece of making sure that the properties kind of get doled out and in a fair manner. But ultimately, a big thing that you will have to do if you're this unlucky is you have to start pushing for trades. And ultimately, there's properties on the board where you have to be willing to spend a little bit of money to have the corresponding power. So, like for example, so we can talk about the oranges hitting way above their weight in terms of strength. So let's just take Virginia Avenue for a second here. And it's 160 for Virginia, but ultimately, if you don't have properties whatsoever, you might want to be looking at offering more for that. 200, 250, whatever. And the reason is because you want to make sure that you have property. Like, you could have all the money in the world, but you have to be making money or else you'll lose. So the amount of money that you get from the board in Monopoly does not make up for how much you're going to be losing to other players. The way you get around that is you're going to have to offer a little more than the sticker price. You can't really be too cheap if your odds, or not your odds, your luck has just not been going well. So what you want to do is you want to start being able to put together a monopoly somewhere. You need to get a monopoly, and ultimately, if you only have a few properties, you could even go for something like green. So let's just say this is not your game at all. You're just getting destroyed, but you're able to scrap together each green, and you can get a few houses on each one. Really, with green, I'm not saying this is the strategy you should be going for in a game. This is like a backup to the backup to the backup strategy here. But if you look at green and say, you know what, actually, I can get like 2 houses on each of these things. If you're able to do that, those pack a lot of punch. And it's easy for somebody who does not have much of cash reserves or tries to build too many houses or whatever, to land on this a few times, and suddenly they're dangerous. Also, it is important to keep in mind that not only is, landing on, say, like 2 houses on Pacific, you're looking at, $390. Well, let's say you get a few rents and you get 3 houses on one of these, and now it's packing $900. That can be a very tough property set to come back from if other people do not have their monopolies properly developed enough. Now, if they do, you're talking lots of houses on, say, like orange or red or something like that. That's harder to get around. But if you've started the game and just a turtle on his back kind of started the game, and you can pull together a monopoly like that, you're able to cut away at the other teams that maybe aren't ready to go yet. And my golden rule is a monopoly anywhere on the board is better than not a monopoly. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous at first, but what I mean is I would rather have the worst monopoly on the board and be able to build houses on it than have the best monopoly on the board and have no ability to build houses or do anything with it, right? like having the orange monopoly set with no houses on it is worthless. It's a completely worthless monopoly in that case. Same with red, same with everything. So ultimately, what you want to do is you want to look at what did you get with those handful of properties that you have, and then how can you work with those? How can you make something happen there? That's the route that you want to take. All right, and then the last question I have here: are you saying that even if you land on green, yellow, or brown properties that are unowned, you shouldn't even bother buying them? That kind of goes along with what I'm saying here. What we're looking at with this is when it comes to properties that are unowned, it has a mix to do with who owns what do you own, and how much money you have. So again, you can win with any property set on the board. There's nothing stopping you from being able to pull it off with any of the property sets. The speed of development really plays a massive key in Monopoly. So even getting something like the yellow or the green, like if you're able to get these in this corner and you have houses on here while people are still trying to figure out the other side of the board and build their stuff, you're going to win. Now with Baltic and Mediterranean, I know some people like these and they're kind of fun and cheap and whatever, but they really don't ever get landed on. Like Mediterranean, for instance, it's impossible to land on Mediterranean Avenue without passing over the go to jail spot. Like it's not possible to land on this spot any other way. So what that means is that regardless of where people are at, they've got to go around the entire board to land there. So these properties, they're super cheap, but they really don't get landed on that much, and they really don't pack that much of a punch. I mean, having a hotel on Baltic Avenue pays the same as having two houses on Pennsylvania Avenue. So ultimately, just from all the perspectives, like it's cool to have the browns. They're super cheap. They're very easy to develop, but they really don't get landed on that much, and they don't really pack enough of a punch to truly take down someone. I mean, for the same, $50 a house, I would go for the light blues because there's a bigger net, and since you're starting at go, or at least, go's a spot that people land on, or get sent to, it's much more likely for somebody to be on go and roll like a 6 or an 8 or a 9 and then land on your stuff here. And I would even put these just straight up to hotel. They're probably the only properties on the board that I would say benefit from having a hotel over 3 houses, at least in the middle of the game. So when it comes to the yellows and the greens, my only thoughts with these is if it's very difficult for you to get all of the properties on the board, like everybody's struggling to get a monopoly, having these is great. Having a piece of them is great. If you can get them for barely over their mortgage cost, like, Pennsylvania Avenue, it's $320. I mean, if you can, so half of that's $160. I mean, if you can get the thing for like $200, that's a great purchase right there. At worst, you're out $40, right? So being able to do that is fantastic. But ultimately, if you're already to the point where you're getting some of the better monopolies, like you're going to be orange, you're going to be red, whatever, what's the point in spending that, let's say that $200, if you're paying $200 for Pennsylvania Avenue, instead of getting your third house on St. James and New York Avenue, well, what are you doing, right? You want to be able to purchase those things. Getting the extra houses is huge, especially on the right monopolies. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely cases where getting these monopolies or making the purchase here makes some sense. But it's a case by case. I would say most of the time, no. Most of the time, no. Like, unless if they're going to be super cheap, you don't want to worry about them. All right. So those are some of the questions that I found there. There's lots more questions. I just picked the first 10 that stuck out to me. So if you have more questions, write them in the comments. And if you guys like this form of video, then I'm open to making some more of these and answering other things. But otherwise, yeah, thanks for watching.